Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be bringing you something very special, and that is our spring planting equipment showcase. This is going to be a tad bit more informal than our harvest equipment tour. I'm just going to walk around, talk about the equipment, and let you kind of see just a very quick look at what we use to plant our crop. If you enjoy the video, make sure you hit the like button, and if you want to see this equipment in action, make sure you subscribe to the channel. As you can tell, nothing's in the barn. We're gonna have to go outside, brave the elements. There's a slight breeze, so I apologize for that, but let's go take a look. We've got a bit of a John Deere maze here to navigate to look at all of our equipment. First, we'll take a look at the tools we use to prepare our seed beds for perfect planting conditions for our planters. Ahead of our corn planter, we run two John Deere 2210 field cultivators. They both have a working width of 44.5 feet. When they're fresh, they have 7-inch Permalock sweeps on them on 10-inch spacing. We have the wings folded up right now just to keep the water outside of them while we park them outside. All of this rust on these sweeps will be gone pretty soon here. We're actually gearing up right now to start planting. Both of these 2210 field cultivators have been in our operation for quite a while now. Very reliable machines. The addition of the drag chain harrow in the rolling basket produces a top-notch seed bed for the planters. A field cultivator has three primary objectives when it goes out in the field. First and foremost, it is out there to kill all of the weeds, those winter annuals that pop up in early spring. You don't want any of those weeds out there competing with your crop. The second thing it does is aerate the soil and dry it out a little bit. And third, it leaves a level and fine seed bed, which is perfect for corn and soybeans. And for an added note, the people up north call these things diggers. I've never once in my life heard a field cultivator called a digger until I got on YouTube. Our third piece of iron here in our spring lineup is this Landall 7431 vertical till. This vertical tillage implement is more of a supplement to our field cultivators. Realistically, it probably will not see that much action. We use it primarily in the fall to chop up corn stalks and create a level surface. That way in the spring, we can no-till soybeans straight into that ground. There's only a few unlikely reasons that this would come out of the shed this spring. One, if a field is extremely weedy and our field cultivators cannot cut through it without dragging up, these vertical till discs are extremely good at cutting through very woolly fields. We usually don't run into that issue, but it's always a possibility. And secondly, if something was to go terribly wrong with one of our field cultivators, we could run this ahead of the corn planter. Really, we do not prefer to run a disc in the spring. The field cultivators do a much better job. It is an option though. It's a relatively simple tool, a set of angle discs in the front, angle discs in the back, and then these big round bar rolling baskets. All three of these implements will be pulled by matching John Deere 9460R four-wheel drive tractors, all 460 horsepower. We use them in the spring and the fall. They have an adequate amount of horsepower for these 44.5 foot field cultivators. If we wanted to go any faster or any wider with our field cultivators, we probably need a few more ponies under the hood. It's so windy, I feel like I'm gonna blow away today. That's good for drying that ground though. This is our corn planter right here. It is a John Deere 1775 NT ExactEmerge planter. This planter is 24 rows on 30-inch spacing, making it 60 foot wide. The ExactEmerge planter is the best planter that John Deere has to offer. It has two electric motors in each row unit, one spinning the plate and one spinning the delivery brush. Because electric motors are so precise with their rotations, they allow for accurate seed quantities and then also very perfect delivery down to the ground. Those two in combination allow this planter to be as good as it is. This planter has a few other features: hydraulic wing downforce, individual hydraulic downforce on each row so the planter units stay flat against the ground and everything's put in at the right depth. The ExactEmerge planter is pulled by this 8310R John Deere front wheel assist tractor, 310 horsepower. The planter is capable of going 10 plus miles an hour. For the most part, this tractor has enough power. When you get into rougher conditions, go up hills, it could probably use a few more horsepower to get the planter going exactly as fast as it's capable of going. They call this ExactEmerge planter the high-speed planting system. They've always bragged that 10 miles an hour is what it's capable of planting at. I've seen this thing run 12 to 13 miles an hour and do just as good as a job as it could do at 10 miles an hour. That is, of course, if you have the power to pull it. Another issue we run into when we're pulling it that fast is the planter likes to kind of sway side to side. Even though the tractor is doing its best to stay straight, the planter finds different channels and grooves in the ground and kind of zigzags its way through the field. It's not normally a problem, but occasionally you get into a spot where your corn rows get a little crooked. They do say you can put more corn in a crooked row, though. Not to try and sound like I'm in a hurry, but I'm literally getting chased out of here by the boss. I think he's getting a little bit antsy for planting season. Once you start to see a few other people in your county turn dirt, makes you want to go do it too. I guess you could say it's kind of like a drug. Last but not least, we have our 1790 planter. It is a 16-row, 32-row splitter soybean planter. It plants 32 rows on 15-inch spacing. It's 40 foot wide. It will be used to plant all of our soybeans this year. We like the more narrow rows for soybeans because it gives us an added bit of plant growth. We get our soybeans to canopy quicker, and we have better weed control as a result. There's also some evidence that shows 15-inch rows have a slight yield advantage over 30-inch rows. That's why our ExactEmerge planter plants all of our corn, and this hydraulically driven 1790 planter plants all of our soybeans. Accuracy is not as big of a deal with soybeans as it is to corn. Corn is very competitive against its neighbors. Soybeans are a lot better at adapting to the conditions they're in and growing to fit that space. This planter doesn't really have any fancy features. It has air downforce, which isn't even as close to as responsive as hydraulic downforce. It lags behind a little bit, whereas the hydraulic downforce adjusts in a matter of milliseconds. As I said though, soybeans are much more vigorous. I consider planting them a controlled spill versus corn that needs to be babied throughout its entire life. We will do a mixture of no-till planting and planting behind field cultivators with this planter. It has the no-till coulters on it. It's perfectly capable of planting into the ground that we used the vertical till on last fall. We have a few farms that we run rippers that don't have an even seed bed, so they'll need field cultivators. If you hopped in a time machine 20 to 30 years ago, farmers usually did not have a second planter dedicated to soybeans. Within the last 10 to 15 years, demand for soybeans across the world has skyrocketed. Planting your soybeans used to be secondary to getting your corn planted, whereas now some farmers make just as much money off of their soybean crop as they do their corn. And they've learned that soybeans can handle being planted early, and they will yield much better if they're planted in a timely manner. In our area, the statistically best time to plant your crop is in mid-April. Once you push soybeans back into May and June, you're giving up at least 10 bushels an acre. A lot of operations, ours included, has a planter for soybeans and then has a really good planter for corn. The ExactEmerge can be used for soybeans as well, but by the time my dad is done planting corn with the ExactEmerge planter, I'm usually close to the finish line with soybeans. Anything I have remaining at that point is typically our more marginal wet soil, and you want narrower rows on that if possible. If we're planting 30-inch row soybeans, we'd prefer to do that on our better ground. Tough crowd around here. I'm not even done yet. We pull the 1790 soybean planter with this John Deere 8285R front wheel assist tractor. This tractor has 285 horsepower. This planter, you really don't want to push anything over 6 to 6.5 miles an hour. 285 horsepower is more than ample to get that job done. If you're trying to pull 32 rows 10 miles an hour, 285 horsepower would not be enough. You probably need more like 360 to 370. But this is not a high-speed planter. If you push this planter over 6.5 miles an hour, it starts to perform pretty poorly. And there goes the field cultivator. An interesting side note about the efficiency of this ExactEmerge planter: if we do not have both of these field cultivators started a few hours early, and I'm sorry, my examples literally took up and run away from me in the middle of my video. If they don't get an early start, this planter will catch them. These have a straight line efficiency, or in a perfect world, if they were driving straight, didn't have to turn, didn't have to travel down the road, any of that jazz, they could work maybe 40 acres an hour a piece. So we have 80 acres an hour capacity. Whereas if you're really pushing this planter, it would not be that hard to hit 100 acres an hour straight line. For comparison, our 20-foot narrower hydraulic drive soybean planter, you'd be lucky to hit 35. And that'd be really pushing it in speed. Whereas this thing plants almost 3 times the amount of acres. Now it is 20 foot wider, so that does give it a little bit more capacity, but it's really the speed that makes up the biggest difference. Well, this is, or was, I guess, like I said, my equipment disappeared, what we use in the spring to prepare a seed bed and put our seeds in the ground. Now we'll jog over and look at a few supplemental pieces of equipment that help ease the process, but this is the lion's share of what you need to plant a crop here in Central Illinois. Since we're cleaning everything up, we'll hop in this 8285R tractor real quick. And I will show you the process of folding it back up. All of the folding and unfolding on this planter is done from this black box. On the newer, higher tech ExactEmerge planter, the folding is controlled from the Green Star screen right here. I wouldn't call this planter a dumb planter, but it's not the top of the pack. This box controls everything through one hydraulic remote. So depending on what I want, these planters just beep all the time. You get used to it after a while. Whatever button I click determines what this first remote does to the planter. So we have it in transport mode, which is what you use to fold and unfold. Usually you do this with 2 hands, but since I'm holding the camera, we're going to detent this back. We have continuous hydraulic closure through the first remote, and then all we do is fold her up. So right here, the bottom one you can see says fold. Hit that button, and there she goes. The wings have 2 hooks on each side, and those hook onto the main tongue here in the middle. So what we have to do is play around with this 3-point hitch, raise and lower it to where we want it. Bring this in a little bit. That wasn't quite it. Get those in, and then we pick up the 3-point, and that locks all the wings in. Now that that's done, all we gotta do is fold up the wings and the wheels. So here's our row lift, and here's our wing wheel lift. If you're good enough, you can hit them both at the same time. I got a few years under my belt, so I'll try it. Not the fastest folder in the world. Gets the job done though. All right, the back rows are in the air. Now you're ready for transport. I'm just pulling this out of the way, but if you were going to drive to another field or put it in the barn or go load seed, this is what you do. Unless you had a pretty keen eye, you probably couldn't tell that the field cultivators and the 4-wheel drives were not actually attached to each other. They were just out there for show purposes, but now we're hooking them up for good. Back it into the drawbar. Alright, did we get it lined up right? Wow. Professional. Hydraulic line just hook here into the back. Each one of these set of doubles is 1 hydraulic remote. So this tractor only has 4 remotes. We put the fold on 2, we put the up and down on 1. They snap into place like that. Take them out, all I gotta do is hit this lever. Takes the tension off. I normally wouldn't do that, but for the sake of showing everyone watch the tour. One's usually set to control up and down. We like to pull towards this to go up, push away to go down. So we're gonna pull that towards us. Lift the field cultivator up. Same deal for number 2, but it controls the folding. Okay, so down is unfolding. Well, this equipment tour kind of turned into a day of work. Thought I was getting today off. We've got to double check the air in the tires of these field cultivators and make sure they're level out in the field. Onward! Now we wait for our turn with the air compressor. We finally had some rock here after decades of trying to get some. Convince the boss somehow. Dad's taking that out to the field right now to see if it's set at the right depth. The real question is, if it goes to the field, will it come back? Sometimes he has a tendency to go out there and keep going, which wouldn't be a bad thing. 65 degrees is a perfect day to start planting. This was not the way I planned this, but you're getting a mix of the equipment tour and some actual work. So apologize if that's not what you want to see. To transport our seed from our storage to our planters, we use these two seed tenders. We have this Unverfirth, it's a double axle seed tender. We use it to load the ExactEmerge corn planter. And then on soybeans, we have this triple axle J&M seed tender. The reason we use this one for soybeans is because it's all remote controlled with a wireless remote, so I can actually load it by myself if the truck's at the field. This one does have a remote, but it's just not quite as friendly to operate as the green one. It just helps a lot to have an extra set of hands on this, whereas like I said, I can do this seed tender all by myself. They both have scale systems to keep track of how much seed you're loading into the planter. That can matter if you don't want to overload your planter and have to dump out seed later. Relatively simple pieces of equipment, but they're extremely helpful to have. Tires are all aired up on this field cultivator. The boss said he's going to try and set it here. I'm assuming that it was too wet over at the field because I saw the field cultivator go back to the other barn. And last but not least, on our equipment tour / unexpected work day, we have our seed and the rest of our seed handling equipment. We handle all of our seed with this old Toyota forklift. It's really kind of a piece of junk, but it gets the job done. We're not running a seed dealership or anything like that, so we don't need anything fancy. Although it's definitely had its better days, it does what we need it to do. Last year we bought this Batco 1540 field loading in conveyor belt. This grants us so much more ease in loading our seed tenders. Before we used to have to swing the conveyors out on the seed tenders, load them in. That's a multiple person job. Now we can just set this conveyor outside facing the drive, come up with the forklift, dump the seed straight in, and it'll load the seed tender. And it has a secondary job now of helping unload our grain bins. One thing you do have to be careful about is in between those two processes is you want to make sure that all the seed treatment is washed out of the conveyor. Elevators and end users do not want any of that seed treatment, and actually they're very, very against having it. So we got to make sure that this is spotless before we take it back to the bin site and use it again. The reason that we like to use it for unloading grain bins is because it's extremely quiet and it does not make a mess. As for seed, we have a pretty wide assortment. On our soybeans, we have some Beck's Extend Flex beans. We have some Burris Don Mario Enlist beans. We have Asgrow Extend Flex beans. We have Agrigold corn, Pioneer corn, DeKalb corn. We also have some Pioneer beans, but we don't store them here, so there's a lot of space actually not taken up, because if they were here, this barn would be pretty tight. On soybean maturity, we typically lean from a 3.0 to a 4.0 soybean. That's kind of ideal for our area. On corn, we'll be anywhere from a 107-day corn to maybe 115-day. If that's planted in April, it will be 15% moisture come late October. We are blessed in our area with a very good amount of natural drying in our crop. A farmer doesn't have to have a dryer unless they absolutely want to run one. And some people like to do that. That's their choice. We'll be emptying out the seed here starting the next few days. All right, everyone, that's going to conclude this video. It kind of went a few different directions, so I'm sorry for the hodgepodgeness of it. Sometimes on the farm, things don't always go the way you're expecting them to. To be honest, I thought I was going to have the day off, and I was just kind of leisurely messing around, filming the tractors, and next thing you know, Dad shows up all go, go, go. That happens around planting time. Some farmers get a little antsy. I filmed this on Saturday, so we have Easter coming up tomorrow. On Monday, sprayers are going to be out. Field cultivators are going to be cracking into some soybean stubble, followed with the corn planter, and I'm going to be no-tilling beans with the soybean planter. So there's going to be a lot in store. Make sure you have channel notifications on. As always, I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and comment down below if you have any questions. You know I love to talk about farming. Have a great night, everyone. Peace!